Hi, my name is Charles Dark, and welcome to the After Dark Show. Today I will be sharing with you. Today I will be sharing with you some stories. I hope you enjoy.
I've been expecting you. Don't bother leaving. There is no way out. This is your reality now. Hello. Welcome to my crypt. Sit down, relax, and enjoy tonight's story. Author, R.L. Stine. Narrator, Shauna Judy. Book, Fear Street, The New Girl. Chapter 1. When Corey Brooks saw the new girl for the first time, he was standing on his head in the lunchroom. Actually, he was standing on his head and one hand while balancing a full lunch tray in his free hand. His black Converse high tops reaching straight up to where his head would normally be. A few seconds earlier, David Metcalf, Corey's best friend, and fellow daredevil from the Shadyside High gymnastics team, had suggested that Corey couldn't perform this feat. "That's too easy, man," Corey had said. Shaking his head, Corey never passed up an opportunity to prove David wrong. He hesitated for only a second, running his hand back through his curly black hair and looking across the large, crowded room to make sure no teachers were watching. Then he flipped over in mid-air, landed, and balanced on his head and hand, without even tilting the loaded tray. And now David was applauding and whistling his approval from a nearby table, along with several other laughing, cheering spectators. "Now do it no hands," David called. "Yeah, do it," Arnie Taubin, another gymnastics team pal, urged. "Do it with no head," another joker yelled. Everyone laughed. Corey, meanwhile, was beginning to feel a little uncomfortable. The blood was rushing to his head. He felt a little dizzy, and the top of his head began to ache from pressing against the hard tile floor. "I dare you to eat your lunch like that," David called, always challenging Corey on to the greater glories. "What's for dessert? Upside-down cake?" a girl yelled from near the windows. Several kids groaned and hissed their disapproval of this bad joke. "Corey, looking good," someone shouted. "What is going on?" called an alarmed voice, the voice of a teacher. The jokes, the loud voices, the cheers and laughter all seemed to fade when the new girl floated into Corey's view. She was so pale, so blonde, so light, so beautiful. At first, he thought he was imagining her. All the blood rushing to his head must be causing him to see things. She was walking against the far wall, heading quickly to the double doorways. Corey caught only a glimpse of her, upside down. She stopped to stare at him. He saw pale blue eyes. His eyes connected with hers. Did she know he was staring back at her? Was she smiling or frowning? It was impossible to tell from his position. Then she shook her blonde head, as if purposefully breaking the connection, and vanished from his view. Those eyes. Who is she? Corey thought. She's incredible. Thinking about the new girl, he forgot to concentrate on the delicate balance that was keeping him upright. The tray fell first. Then Corey fell, his face sliding messily into his food, his chest hitting the floor hard, his long legs sprawling behind him. The room erupted in laughter and sarcastic applause. "Do it again!" Arnie Tobin's voice boomed. Arnie could outshout any crowd. David hurried over to help Corey up. "Any more bright ideas?" Corey groaned, pulling spaghetti and tomato sauce out of his hair. "Next time, just get a sandwich," David said, laughing. He had carrot-colored hair and freckles almost as orange, and he had a whooping, high-pitched laugh that could make dogs perk up their ears for miles around. Corey used the front of his t-shirt to wipe spaghetti sauce from his face. When he looked up, Mr. McCready, the lunchroom monitor, was in front of him. She didn't say anything. She just shook her head. "Sorry about that," Corey said, feeling more than a little foolish. "About what?" Miss McCready asked, keeping a straight face. Corey laughed. Thank goodness Miss McCready had a good sense of humor. "It was all Arnie's idea," David told her, pointing back to the table where Arnie was busily shoving pretzel sticks into his mouth 3 at a time. "I don't think Arnie's ever had an idea," Miss McCready said, still straight-faced. Then she gave Corey a quick wink and walked away. Still dripping with noodles and tomato sauce, Corey bent down to pick up the tray. "Hey, David, who was that girl?" "What girl?" "The blonde girl. The one who walked out while..." "Who?" David seemed confused. He picked up Corey's scattered silverware and tossed it onto the tray. "A new girl?" Corey groaned. "Didn't you see her?" "No. I was watching you, making a total dork of yourself." "Me? It was your idea." "It wasn't my idea to do a face dive into a plate of spaghetti." "She's blonde, and she was wearing a pale blue dress." "Who?" "The girl I saw." "You saw a girl wearing a dress to school?" "You don't believe me?" "Huh?" Corey looked to the doorway as if she might still be there. But then his stomach growled, and he remembered he'd just ruined his lunch. "Hey, David, you got any money? I'm starving." "Don't look at me, man," David said, grinning and backing away. "Come on, you owe me." Corey put the tray down on an empty table and started to come after him. "No way, man." "Where's your lunch? We'll split it." Corey changed direction and headed toward David's table. "My lunch? Forget it. I haven't..." Corey took the apple of David's tray, then grabbed a handful of pretzel sticks from Arnie's. "Hey, I need those," Arnie protested, making a futile swipe to get them back. "Be a pal," Corey said, through a mouthful of apple. "We've got practice after school, right? If I don't eat, I'll be too weak to climb onto the balance beam." "Break my heart," Arnie said as he broke off the pretzels in Corey's hand and shoved the halves quickly into his own mouth. "Maybe the rest of us will stand a chance." Corey detected more than a little resentment from Arnie. He felt bad about that, but what could he do? He couldn't help it if he was a more talented gymnast than his teammates. He had been on the varsity gymnastics team since his freshman year at Shady Side, and Coach Wellner really thought he had a chance of making the All-State Championships the following spring. "It's a good thing Coach Wellner didn't see me fall into my lunch," Corey thought. He finished off the last of Arnie's pretzel sticks and slurped up the last few drops of David's chocolate milk, then crushed the cardboard container in his hand. "A well-balanced lunch," he said, hiccuping. Arnie was busy showing David a new way to slap someone 5. He had a serious look on his normally grinning face, and he was slapping David's hand again and again, trying to get it just right. Not like that jerk, he kept saying. Corey couldn't figure out who was the jerk. Later, he told them, tossing the crushed milk carton into a trash basket halfway across the room. They didn't look up. He headed toward the double doors, ignoring some kids who were laughing about his stained shirt and the congealed tomato sauce in his hair. Hey, Corey, think fast! Someone threw a milk carton at him. It bounced off a table and hit the floor. He didn't turn around. He was thinking about the girl in the blue dress again. He had seen her for only a few seconds, upside down, but he knew she was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. Hauntingly beautiful. The phrase popped into his head. He realized he was looking for her as he headed down the hall to his locker. Where is she? Who is she? I didn't imagine her. Did I? Hey, Corey, you swimming your lunch? He didn't turn around to see who that was. He realized he must look pretty bad. Suddenly, he hoped he wouldn't run into the girl now. He didn't want her to see him with tomato sauce in his hair and all over his shirt. He stood in front of his locker, trying to decide what to do. Was there time to head down to the showers? He looked at his watch. No, the bell for 5th period would ring in less than 2 minutes. Maybe he could cut English. No, Mr. Heston was explaining the term paper assignment today. Lisa Bloom walked up and began turning the combination lock to open her locker. She pulled the lock open, then looked at him. You look great. Thanks. He looked down at his shirt. This reminds you of when we were little kids? No. You were neater then. She laughed. Corey and Lisa had lived next door to each other in the North Hills section of town for their entire lives. They had played together since they were toddlers. The two families were so close, they were like one big family. Living so close together, Corey and Lisa had managed to stay friends even through those years when boys only play with boys and girls only play with girls. Now, as teenagers, they knew each other so well. They were so comfortable with each other. Their friendship seemed a natural part of life. Lisa had dark, good looks, long black hair that tumbled in curls down to her shoulders, black almond-shaped eyes, dark lipstick lips that curled into a half-smile whenever she said something funny, which was often. A lot of kids said she looked like Cher. Lisa pretended not to be flattered by the comparison, but she was secretly pleased. Now she stared at Corey in front of their lockers. I was standing on my head in the lunchroom, he told her, as if that fully explained his appearance. Not again, she said. She bent down to pick up some books from the floor of the locker. Who are you showing off for this time? Her question annoyed him. I didn't say I was showing off. I just said I was standing on my head. David dared you to, right? How'd you know? Lucky guess. She stood up, her arms filled with texts and notebooks. You can't go into class like that. You smell like a pizza. What can I do? Here, you can borrow a t-shirt. She bent down again to rummage in the cluttered locker. A girl's shirt? I can't wear a girl's shirt. He grabbed the sleeve of her sweater and started to pull her up. She pulled out of his grasp. It's not a girl's shirt. It's from the Gap. It's for girls or boys. You know, it's just a shirt. She pulled the black and white striped t-shirt out and tossed it up to him. But wash your hair before you put it on. The warning bell rang. Locker doors slammed. The hall grew quiet as kids disappeared into their 5th period classes. Get real! How can I wash my hair? She pointed to the water fountain across the hall. He smiled at her gratefully. You're smart. Lisa, I always said you were smart. That's a real compliment coming from a guy who puts his head in his spaghetti, she said. her mouth sliding into that familiar, wiry half-smile. "Hold the water on for me," he said, walking quickly to the low white fountain. He looked down the hall to make sure no one was watching. The hall was nearly deserted. "No way. Corey, I don't want to be late." She followed him anyway. "And I certainly don't want to be seen with you." "You're a pal, Lisa." He didn't see her frown. She hated that word. She hated to be a pal. She sighed and turned the water knob. Then she stood there, hoping that no one would come by as they plunged his head into the fountain and frantically struggled to scrub the dried sauce from his tangled curls. The bell rang. She let go of the fountain. "Corey, I've got to go." He stood up, water pouring down his face. "Good thing the water in this fountain never gets cold," he said. He pulled off the stained t-shirt and dried his hair with it. "Corey, really, I don't want to be late." She tossed the clean t-shirt at him and, struggling to hold on to her armload of books, ran to class. The striped shirt fell onto the floor in front of Corey's sneakers. Still rubbing his hair dry with the dirty shirt, he bent over to pick it up. When he stood up, he saw her again. First he saw her blue dress. Then he saw her blonde hair. She was halfway down the hall, hurrying to class. There was something strange about the way she moved. Her feet didn't make a sound as she ran. She was so light, she seemed to be floating a few inches above the ground. "Hey, wait!" he called to her. She heard him. She stopped and turned her head, her blonde hair swirling behind her. Once again, her blue eyes connected with his. What was that in her eyes? Was it fear? Her lips moved. She was saying something to him, but he couldn't hear her. "Please don't." Is that what she had said? No, that wasn't it. That couldn't be it. Corey was a terrible lip reader. Please don't. No. What had she really said? Why did she look so frightened? "Please, wait," he called, but she vanished into a classroom. Chapter 2. Corey slammed the gym locker shut and angrily pounded his fist against it. "Hey, what's the matter with you, man?" David asked, still in his practice sweats. "I stink," Corey shouted. "I look like a spaz on the bars today." "So, what else is new?" David said with a shrug. "At least you didn't sprain your ankle." He rubbed the ankle, which was swollen nearly to the size of a softball. "Later," Corey muttered disgustedly. He tossed his wet towel over David's head and angrily shoved his way out through the locker room door. He just had the worst practice of the year, maybe of his life, and he knew why. It was the new girl. Corey had been looking for her for 3 days. He hadn't seen her since that brief moment in the hall, before 5th period on Monday, but he hadn't been able to get her out of his mind ever since. She was just so beautiful. He had even dreamed about her that first night. In the dream, he was eating lunch in school. She seemed to float across the lunchroom. She came up to his table, her blue eyes shimmering like the ocean in sunlight. She leaned down and her hair fell over his face, soft and fragrant. She started to kiss his face, his cheek, his forehead, his other cheek. Soft kisses, so soft he couldn't feel them. He wanted to feel her kisses. He tried to feel them, but he couldn't feel a thing. He reached up to touch her face. His hand seemed to go right through her, and he woke up. The dream stayed with him. It should have been a nice dream, an exciting dream, but it wasn't. There was something eerily cold about the dream. Why couldn't he feel her kisses or touch her face? For the next 3 days he had looked for her in the lunchroom and in the halls between classes. He had even waited by the front doors after school. hoping to get a glimpse of her, but she had never appeared, and none of the guys Corey had asked knew who she was or even remembered seeing her. Now, as he trudged through the empty corridor, he tried to think about why his timing had been so off during gymnastics practice. But her face kept floating into his mind, and once again, he imagined her floating across the hall. "Are you real?" Corey asked aloud, his voice echoing off the tile walls. "Yeah, I'm real. But what are you?" a girl's voice replied, nearly startling him out of his high tops. "Huh?" He spun around to find Lisa behind him, a questioning look on her face. "Talking to yourself these days?" He could feel his face reddening. "What are you doing here? It's after 5 o'clock. It's my school too, you know. I can stay as long as I like. You jocks think you own the place." He shrugged. He wasn't in the mood to joke around with her. "I was working on The Spectator. We were pasting it up today." Lisa was assistant editor of the Shady Side High school paper. "I suppose you were doing flip-flops on the gym." "It's not flip-flops," he said grumpily. "We have a match against Matwin Friday night." "Good luck," she said, punching his shoulder. "They're pretty good, right?" "They're not that good." They walked down the hall, their footsteps echoing loudly. At their lockers, they stopped to pull out jackets and book bags. "You going home?" Lisa asked. "Want company?" "Sure," he said, although he really didn't. They walked out the back doorway and stepped down into the teacher's parking lot. Beyond the parking lot stood the football stadium, a concrete oval with long wooden bleachers on two sides. And behind the stadium stood Shady Side Park, a wide grassy park, dotted with ancient oaks and sycamores and sassafras trees, sloping gradually down to the banks of the Kanawha River, actually a narrow, meandering stream. The nearness of the park made it an afternoon hangout for just about everyone who didn't have an after-school job. It was great for meeting friends, relaxing, enjoying after-school picnics or impromptu parties, studying, making out, playing endless games of frisbee, taking an afternoon siesta, or just staring at squirrels or the slow-flowing river. But not tonight. The wind was cold and gusty, and it swirled tangles of brown leaves in fast circles over the parking lot. Zipping their down jackets against the unexpected cold, Corey and Lisa looked up to a sky that was heavy and dark. A November sky. A snow sky. "Let's go the front way," he said. They headed around toward the front of the school. She leaned against him as they walked. He figured she was trying to keep warm. "Guess it's really winter," she said. They turned up Park Drive and headed toward North Hills, a walk they had made together thousands of times. Tonight seemed different to him somehow. He guessed he was just in a bad mood. They were silent for a long time, leaning up the hill, the gusting wind first behind them, then blowing hard in their faces. Then they both spoke at once. "Have you seen a girl with blonde hair?" And she, "Are you doing anything this weekend?" "Saturday night." They both stopped talking at the same time, then started again at the same time. She shoved him. "You go first." He shoved her back, but not as hard. "No, you." A car horn honked at them, probably someone from school. A dark blue Honda Accord sped by. It was too dark to see who was inside. "I asked if you were doing anything Saturday night," she said, leaning against him again. "No, I don't think so." "I'm not either," she told him. Her voice sounded funny, a little tense. He decided it was just because of the wind. "Have you seen a girl with blonde hair and big blue eyes?" he asked. "What?" "A very pretty girl. but strange looking, kind of old-fashioned, very pale. She let go of his arm. He didn't see the disappointed look on her face. "You mean Anna?" she asked. He stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression suddenly excited. The streetlights flickered on. It looked as if he was lighting up because of her answer. "Anna? Is that her name? You know her?" "She's a new girl. Very pale, blonde, has her hair just brushed straight back, with a barrette in front. Wears dresses all the time." "Yeah, that's her. Anna. What's her last name?" "I don't know," Lisa snapped, then regretted revealing how annoyed she was. "Corwin. I think Anna Corwin. She's in my 3rd period psychs class." "Wow," he said, still not moving. The trees casting across his face as they bent in the wind. "You know her? What's she like?" "No, Corey, I don't know her. I told you, she's a new girl. I don't know her at all. She never says a word in class. Sits in the back row, as pale as a ghost. She's absent a lot. Why are you so hot to know her?" "What else do you know?" Corey asked, ignoring her question. "Come on." "That's it," Lisa said impatiently. She started walking on ahead of him, taking long strides. He ran to catch up. "I thought I made her up," he said. "No, she's real," Lisa replied. "She doesn't look real, but she's real. You in love with her or something?" "Oh, I know. David and you made a bet to see which one could get a date with her first." She shoved him again, nearly knocking him off the sidewalk. "I'm right, aren't I? You two always pick on the new girls." Again, he didn't seem to hear her. "Don't you know anything else about her? Whose homeroom is she in? Where does she live?" "Oh, yeah, I did hear that. She transferred here from Melrose. Her family moved into a house on Fear Street." "Fear Street?" Corey stopped short, suddenly chilled. Fear Street, a narrow street that would pass the town cemetery and through the thick woods on the south edge of town, had a special meaning for everyone in Shadyside. The street was cursed, people said. The blackened shell of a burned-out mansion, Simon Fear's old mansion, stood high on the first block of Fear Street, overlooking the cemetery, casting eerie shadows that stretched to the dark, tangled woods. Terrifying howls, half human, half animal, hideous cries of pain, were said to float out from the mansion late at night. People in Shadyside grew up hearing the stories about Fear Street, about people who wandered into the woods there and disappeared forever, about strange creatures that supposedly roamed the Fear Street woods, about mysterious fires that couldn't be put out, and bizarre accidents that couldn't be explained, about vengeful spirits that haunted the old houses and prowled through the trees, about unsolved murders and unexplained mysteries. When Corey and Lisa were kids, their friends liked to dare one another to go for a walk on Fear Street at night. It was a challenge few kids were willing to accept, and those who did never stayed on Fear Street for long. Now, even though Corey was older, the words Fear Street still brought a chill. "I think Anna belongs on Fear Street," Lisa said, giving Corey her half-smile. "She could haunt one of those old houses as good as any ghost." "I think she's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen," he said, as if he felt he had to defend her against all attacks. "So do you have a bet with David or what?" she asked. "No," he snapped, lost in thought. They reached their houses, dark shingled ranch houses, almost identical, set back far from the street behind tall hedges of evergreens, on wide manicured lawns, as were most of the houses in North Hills, the nicest section of town. About Saturday night, she tried again. Yeah, right. See you tomorrow, he said, and began jogging up the long paved drive to his house. Anna Corwin. The name repeated in his mind. What a nice old-fashioned name. That's right, operator. The family's name is Corwin. It's a new number on Fear Street. I'm looking for it, sir, the information operator said. There was a long silence. Why am I so nervous just calling information? Corey asked himself. He had thought about Anna all through dinner. Now, up in his room, he had decided to get her phone number. I know I'm going to be too nervous to call her, he thought. I just want to get the number, in case I want to call her someday. There was a long silence. He sat leaning over the desk in his room, pencil poised over the yellow pad he kept near the phone. Yes, here's the number. It's a new listing. The operator read him the number, and he scribbled it down. And what's the address on Fear Street, operator? We're not supposed to give that out, sir. Come on, I promise I won't tell anybody, Corey laughed. Surprisingly, the operator laughed too. I guess it's okay. It's my last night anyway. It's 44-4 Fear Street. Thanks a lot, operator. You're a nice person. You're nice too, she said, and quickly clicked off. Corey stood over his desk and stared at Anna's phone number on the yellow pad. Should he call it? If he called her, what would he say? Call her, Corey. Go ahead. Don't be such a chicken. She's only a girl, after all. Sure, she's the most beautiful girl you've ever seen, but she's only a girl. He picked up the receiver. His hand was cold and clammy, even though it was quite hot in his room. He stared at the number on the yellow pad until it blurred before his eyes. No, I can't call her. What would I say? I just stammer around and sound like a jerk. She already thinks I'm a jerk after seeing me standing on my head in the lunchroom. He put down the phone receiver. No, I can't. I just can't. Sure, why not? He picked up the receiver. This is stupid. I'm going to make an idiot of myself. He punched her phone number. Put the phone down, Corey. Don't be a jerk. It rang once, twice. Maybe she won't even remember who I am. It rang again. Nobody home, I guess. Whew. He let it ring 4 more times. He was just about to hang up when he heard a click at the other end, and a young man's voice answered. Yeah? Oh, hello. For some reason, he wasn't expecting anyone but Anna to answer. His mouth was suddenly so dry. He wondered if he could speak. Yeah? Is Anna there? What? Who was this guy? Why did he sound so annoyed? Maybe Corey had woken him up. I'm sorry, is this the Corwin house? Corey asked. Yeah, it is, the young man rasped in his ear. Could I speak to Anna, please? There was a very long silence. Sorry, this is the Corwins, but there's no Anna here. The phone clicked off. Chapter 3. When Corey arrived at school the next morning, Anna Corwin was the first person he saw. It was raining hard, a freezing rain driven by gusty winds. He ran into the building through the side door. His leather jacket pulled up over his head. His wet sneakers slid across the floor, and he nearly collided with her. Oh! He grabbed the wall and stopped. He pulled down his jacket and stared at her. Her locker was the first one next to the door. She was pulling books off the top shelf and didn't seem to notice that he had nearly run into her. She wore a white sweater over a gray skirt. Her hair was tied back behind her head with a white ribbon. She's so pale, he thought. It's like I can almost see through her skin. Suddenly, the young man's raspy voice on the phone came back to him. This is the Corwins. but there's no Anna here. Well, here she was. What was that guy trying to prove? Why had he lied to Corey? Maybe it was a jealous boyfriend, Corey thought. Or maybe Corey had dialed the wrong number, and the guy was just pulling a mean joke. "Hi," he said, swinging his book bag down off his shoulder. A stream of water poured from it onto his already soaked sneakers. She turned, surprised that someone was talking to her. Her eyes, those amazing eyes, looked into his, then quickly looked down. "Hello," she said. Then she cleared her throat nervously. "You're new," he said. "Brilliant line, Corey. Wow, that's a real winner. You say 2 words to her and she already knows what a dork you are." "Yes," she said. She cleared her throat again. Her voice was little more than a whisper, but she seemed pleased that he was talking to her. "Your name is Anna, right? I'm Corey Brooks." "That's a little better, Corey. Just calm down, man. You're doing okay." He reached out to shake her hands. He had to touch her to know for sure that she was real, but his hand was dripping wet. They both stared at it. He quickly brought it back to his side. "Nice to meet you," she said, turning back to search for something in her locker. "You moved on to Fear Street, right?" It was almost time for the bell to ring, but he didn't want to leave her. It had taken so long to find her. She cleared her throat. "Yes." "You must be pretty brave. Have you heard all the scary stories about Fear Street? About the ghosts and things?" "Ghosts?" Her eyes grew wide, and her face filled with such sudden fright. He was immediately sorry he had said that. She seemed to grow even more pale. "What kind of stories?" "Just stories," he said quickly. "Not all of them are true, I don't think." "Nice going, Corey." Was that the only thing you could think of to say? How feeble can you get? "Oh," she said softly. The fear didn't leave her eyes. She's so pretty, he thought. Everything about her is so soft, so light. His dream about her came back to him. It made him feel a little embarrassed. "Hey, Corey, looking good," some guy called to him. He turned to see who it was. It was just Arnie. Give him the okay sign from down the hall. "Later, Arnie," he called. He watched Arnie go into the wood shop, then turned back to Anna. I called your house last night. I just wanted to say hi. A guy answered and said you didn't live there. Did I have the wrong phone number? Or..." "No," she whispered, closing her locker and locking it. Then she turned without looking back at him and ran down the hall, disappearing into the crowd of kids heading to homeroom. "Good mat routine," Coach Wellner said, giving Corey a hearty slap on the back. Corey, still breathing hard, grinned back at the coach. He knew he had done a good routine, but it was always nice to hear it from the coach. Mr. Wellner, a stern, powerful-looking man with a bodybuilder's physique, even though he was in his late 50s, was sparing with his compliments. So when he said something nice, it meant something. Behind them, the match against Matawan, the first match of the season, continued. Corey looked to the bench for David, wondering if his friend had witnessed his near-perfect routine. Then he remembered that David had sprained his ankle at the last practice. David was somewhere up in the bleachers, feeling sorry for himself and being miserable. "Now, don't press too hard on the rings," Coach Wellner warned. "You've been pushing yourself, trying to go too fast up there, and it's been throwing you off your rhythm." "Yeah," Corey said, still trying to catch his breath. "You feel nervous?" the coach asked, staring at Corey, as if trying to see the nervousness in his eyes. "No, not really. Just excited." "Good. That's what we want." Mr. Wellner seemed very pleased. "Just remember, don't push it. Easy does it." He turned away from Corey and let out a loud groan. "Get up, Tobin. You can rest later." Arnie had just done the backflip to finish his mat routine and had landed flat on his backside. The 20 or 30 spectators in the bleachers were laughing their heads off. Arnie's face turned bright scarlet as he pulled himself up and slumped off the mat. Coach Wellner closed his eyes and shook his head disgustedly. Arnie's slip wasn't going to help the Shadyside team score, and the floor routine was the best part of Arnie's program. He was a complete klutz on the rings, and his parallel bar work was uneven to say the least. The Matawan guys were midgets compared to Corey and his teammates, but that gave them an advantage. They were light and strong and agile. A guy like Arnie should be playing tackle on the football team, Corey thought. Whatever made him want to be a gymnast. Whatever made Arnie decide to do anything. He was one of the flakiest guys Corey had ever known. He just grinned his way through life, seemingly without ever having a serious thought cross through his mind. "Okay, Brooks," Coach Wellner's voice broke into Corey's thoughts. "Go show him how it's done." Corey took a deep breath and headed to the rings. For some reason, they always looked so much higher at a real competition than in practice. He shut the world out as he started his routine. He didn't need his brain. The moves were all locked in his muscles. After practicing these moves thousands and thousands of times, he was like a machine, a smoothly running machine. "Okay, up and over. Very smooth. Corey, now faster. You ready? Here comes the hard part. Up, up." And he saw Anna sitting in the bleachers. Was it really Anna? No, it couldn't be. Could it? And over. And again. Stop. Reverse. No, it was another blonde girl. The eyes. Those were her eyes. Yes, it was Anna. What a surprise. She was staring up at him with those blue eyes. "She's watching me," he thought. "She came to watch me." He stared back at her, and he slipped and dropped hard to the floor. He didn't feel any pain. He was just confused. He didn't really fall, did he? He didn't really blow the whole routine just because a certain girl had caused him to lose his concentration. "I'm falling for her," he said aloud, laughing as he slowly climbed to his feet. "What's so funny, Brooks?" Coach Wellner was shouting. "I'm falling for her," Corey repeated to himself. It was the second time he had fallen because of her. The second time he had embarrassed himself in front of a lot of people. Was that true love, or what? "What's so funny, Brooks?" Coach Wellner looked concerned. "Are you hysterical or something? You didn't hit your head, did you?" "I'm okay," Corey said, kicking the edge of a mat. "I just slipped, that's all." "There'll be other matches," Coach Wellner said. He suddenly looked very tired. "This one's a comedy act. Go shower, Brooks, and go home and forget about today." "Right, Coach." Corey looked up to the bleachers. He remembered just where she was sitting, in the center of the third row. But she wasn't there now. He stared at an empty space in the row. His heart sank. Had she been there in the first place? He hadn't imagined her, had he? Was he cracking up because of this girl? No, of course not. "I have to talk with her," he told himself. "I have to call her again." Chapter 4. Corey stared at the calendar hanging over his desk. Saturday night. Saturday night, and I'm sitting up here alone in my room, Walkman blasting in my ears, staring at my desk, not even hearing the music, thinking about Anna Corwin. A guy could get pretty depressed, he told himself. He tore off the Walkman headphones and tossed them onto the desk. Anna. 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 It's spelled the same both ways. Brilliant, Corey. Just brilliant. Your mind really is turning to cheese, isn't it? He knew he had to stop thinking about her. But how could he? She kept floating into his thoughts no matter what he did. He had liked other girls before, but never like this. He leaned over and grabbed the phone. I'll ask her to a movie, or something, he told himself. If I can just get to know her a little, maybe I won't be so crazy, so obsessed. Those eyes, that whisper of a voice, as faint as the wind. No, stop. I can't call her on a Saturday night. You can't call a girl on a Saturday night. She's probably out. I'll try her anyway, he decided. She seemed so pleased when I talked to her at her locker. No, I can't call her. She'll be insulted. She'll think I'm calling on a Saturday night because I know she wouldn't be out with somebody. I'll call David instead. Maybe he and I can go down to the mall and check out the action. No, David can't go anywhere. He's hobbling around with crutches because of his ankle. Call her, Corey. She'll be thrilled to hear from you. Oh, sure, thrilled. The klutz who always falls on his face when she looks at him. He put down the receiver. Not tonight. No way. I know. I'll catch her at her locker on Monday. Maybe ask her to the basketball game next Friday. He felt a lot better. He had a plan. Now what should I do? The clock on his desk said 8:30. His parents had a hot scramble game downstairs with Lisa's parents. Corey decided maybe he'd wander next door and see if Lisa was doing anything. Lisa home? He called in the den, pulling on a sweatshirt. Yes, she is, Miss Bloom called. Why don't you go over and keep her company? She was kind of down in the dumps because she didn't have a date tonight. Okay, Corey said, grabbing a bag of potato chips and a box of chocolate chip cookies off the kitchen shelf to take with him. There was never anything to eat at the Blooms' house. That was probably the real reason Lisa was depressed. She was probably starving, he figured. I can talk to her about Anna, Corey told himself. He was eager to discuss Anna with someone. Whenever he brought up the subject with David or Arnie, they just teased him and made bad jokes. How'd the match with Mathwena go? Mr. Bloom called. Don't ask him that, Corey heard his mum say. Don't ask me that, Corey repeated. He fell on his keister, Corey's dad said in a whisper loud enough to be heard across the street. They all laughed. Thanks, Dad, Corey said. Thanks a bunch. Holding the cookies and potato chips on one arm, he pulled open the back door and stepped out into a frosty night. A sliver of a moon was partially hidden by thin wisps of clouds. That moon is so pale, he thought. It's the same color as Anna's hair. Uh-oh, Corey. You better watch it, man. You're starting to see her everywhere, even in the moon. You're getting weird, man. Too weird. You've got to cool it. He had to knock 3 times before Lisa opened the back door. She was wearing cut-off jeans and an enormous old white shirt that must have been her dad's. Oh, hi, she said, sighing. It's only you. Who'd you think? I thought it was a burglar, you know? Someone exciting. She backed up so that they could walk in. She smiled. I'm only kidding. I'm glad you came over. He held up the food packages. Now I'm really glad, she said, grabbing them both out of his hands. I'm starving. He followed her into the den and sat down on the brown leather couch against the wall. She poured the potato chips into a big ceramic bowl and sat down next to him. Another fabulous Saturday night. What were you doing? He asked, grabbing a handful of chips and dropping them down into his mouth, one by one from above. They tasted better that way, he thought. Nothing. I rented a movie, but I haven't started it yet. Want to watch it with me? I don't know. What is it? She walked over to the counter under the TV and held up a videotape box. A Star Trek movie. He gave her a double thumbs down. I'm not into Star Trek. Neither am I, she said, sighing again. I got to the video store late. Everything was gone. She slumped back down on the couch, closer to him this time. They both reached out for more potato chips at the same time. Her hand grabbed his. She quickly let go. He didn't notice that she looked embarrassed. So, how are things, Corey? She asked, turning to face him. Their knees touched. Not great, he said, shrugging. She put her hand on his arm. He could feel the warmth through his sweatshirt. Poor baby. What's your problem? Oh, I don't know. Nothing really. Everything? She tissed. They didn't say anything for a while. She moved her hand up to his hair and began to finger his curls. I heard about the gymnastics match, she said softly. I blew it, he muttered, shaking his head. I just blew it. She leaned against him, still rolling her finger tightly in his hair. Don't be so tough on yourself, Corey. It's only the first competition. She shoved the potato chip bowl aside and scooted even closer to him. Anna Corwin was there, he said. I saw her watching me, and I was so surprised, I guess I lost my concentration. What? I said Anna Corwin was there. I saw those blue eyes staring at me and... Creep? What? Nothing. I didn't say anything. She pulled away from him and jumped to her feet. He looked up, bewildered. Why did she look so angry? Have you ever talked with Anna? He asked. She stood over him and crossed her arms in front of her. Corey, I think you should go home. Huh? I just got here. No, really, go home, okay? But why? I'm just not in the mood for company, okay? I'll see you in school Monday. I just don't feel like talking tonight. He got up slowly, still confused. Okay, sorry you're not feeling well. Should I leave the chips and cookies? She glared at him. She picked up the box of cookies for a second. He thought she was going to fling it at him. But she put it in his hand. Take the cookies. I'll finish the chips. What the heck? Might as well get fat. Why not? Glad I could cheer you up? He said, trying to get her to smile. She didn't. A few seconds later, he was back outside, heading over the frosty hard grass to his house. A few seconds after that, he was back in his room, sitting on his bed, trying to figure out what to do for the rest of the night. What was Lisa's problem? He wondered. It wasn't like her to be so moody. She wasn't depressed just because she didn't have a date. Something else had to be bothering her. But what? He glanced at his desk clock. 9:25. His eye fell on the yellow pad beside the phone. Walked over to the desk and stared down at Anna's phone number. Without stopping to think about it, without giving himself time to get nervous, time to talk himself out of it, he punched her number. It rang once, twice, the sound seeming very far away, even though it was just on the other side of town. After the third ring, he heard a click. Someone picked it up. A soft female voice said, Corwin's, hello. Hello, Anna? There was a long pause. Corey listened to the static on the line. Who? The woman's voice repeated. May I speak to Anna, please? Oh, the woman let out a loud gasp. More silence. Then Corey heard a loud screech in the background. What was that awful sound? It sounded like a girl screaming. Yes. Must be the TV, he told himself. It had to be the TV. Why do you call here asking for Anna? The woman demanded angrily. Well, Again, Corey heard the girl shrieking in the background. Let me talk. It's for me. I know it's for me. The woman ignored the girl's cries. Why do you call to torture me like this? She asked Corey, her voice trembling. Well, is Anna there? Corey asked. No, the woman insisted. You know Anna isn't here. You know she isn't. Stop. Please stop. He heard the beginning of another scream. Then the phone clicked off. Chapter 5. Corey listened to the hum of the dial tone for a while as he waited for his heart to stop pounding. He played the conversation with the woman over and over again in his mind until the words became a blur. And over the blur he heard the screams. The girl's screams of protest in the background. Let me talk. It's for me. I know it's for me. What was going on there? Corey's mind whirred with crazy, frightening thoughts. What were they doing to Anna? Why wouldn't they let her come to the phone? Why do they keep insisting she wasn't there? Fear Street. Was it claiming another victim? Was Anna being held prisoner in her own house? Were they torturing her? You've seen too many bad movies, he told himself. You're being ridiculous. Then what was the explanation? I'll go over there, he said aloud. The idea just popped into his mind. It seemed simple enough. He glanced at the desk clock. It was just a little after 10. Still early. He examined himself in the mirror on his closet door, straightened the sleeves on his sweatshirt, pushed his dark curly hair back from his forehead with his hands, and headed out of his room and down the stairs toward the den. He stopped halfway down the stairs. Hold on a minute. Do I really want to go to Fear Street? By myself? What if something horrible really is happening in that house? What if those screams were real? The big local news story of a few weeks before suddenly flashed into his mind. A family of 3 had been found murdered in the Fear Street woods. No one was reported missing. No one came forward to identify them. Just another Fear Street unsolved murder. Corey decided to call David and ask him to come along. David was sure to be sitting home, staring at his ankle, bored out of his mind. He needed a little excitement. To Corey's surprise, David thought the idea was a little strange. Let me get this straight, Brooks, he said after Corey had explained their mission. You want to drive over to Fear Street and break in on someone's horror movie to find a girl who isn't there in the first place? Right, Corey said. Okay, sounds good to me, Dave replied. Pick me up in 10 minutes. Make it 5? Corey said and hung up before David could change his mind. Good old David, Corey thought. I can always count on him to be as stupid as I am. The Scrabble game was still going strong downstairs in the den. The board was nearly filled, and all 4 adults sat staring at it in silence, concentrating on finding a usable open space. I'm going out for a short while, he told his dad. Which card can I take? Kind of late, isn't it? His mother asked without looking up from the board. She had a letter square in her hand, a blank which she was rolling over and over between her fingers. It's only 10. Take the Taurus, his father said. Don't take your mother's car. Where are you going? His mother insisted. Just over to David's. It's partly true. Are you going to make a word of what? Miss Bloom asked Corey's mom with that impatient tone everyone gets near the end of an endless Scrabble game. How's David doing? Mr. Brooks asked. Bad, Corey told him. He's on crutches. He's pretty depressed. Poor guy, Miss Bloom muttered, staring at her letters. I pass, Miss Brooks said, sighing unhappily. Corey grabbed the keys off the front counter and headed out to the car. David lived about 6 blocks away in the northern corner of North Hills, almost to the river. It was a 2-minute drive. Corey knocked on the front door and waited. It took a long time for David to get to the door. "Sorry, man, I can't go with you," was his greeting. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I can't go. My mom won't let me." He looked embarrassed. "Hi, Corey," David's mother called from behind David in the hallway. "I really don't want David to go out tonight. He's got to stay off that ankle. Besides, he's getting a cold. You understand." "Sure, Miss Metcalf," Corey said, unable to hide his disappointment. "A cold." He grinned at David. "We wouldn't want Mama's angel to catch a nasty cold, would we?" David rolled his eyes and shrugged. "Give me a break." "I'll call you later and let you know what happened on Fear Street," Corey said. "If you don't hear from me, send out the Marines or the National Guard." "Have you seen Poltergeist?" David asked. "If you go in that house, you might be sucked right into the TV screen." Corey didn't laugh. "You think this is all a big joke, don't you?" David gave him an exaggerated, wide grin. "I think it's a riot." "Well," Corey turned and stomped down the flagstone walk back toward his car. "You're probably right." Corey drove south on Park Drive and headed toward Fear Street. It was a cold and raw night. Thick clouds of fog drifted rapidly down from the hills. He turned up the heater and pushed on the radio. He needed some loud music to keep up his spirits. "It's a quick rock Beatles blast," the disc jockey screamed enthusiastically. 24 hours of Beatles hits in alphabetical order." Corey laughed. Why would anyone want to listen to music in alphabetical order? He wished David were there to share the laugh. He wished David were there, period. He really didn't like the idea of roaming around Fear Street on a cold, foggy night on his own. "Oh well, I won't get out of the car," he told himself. "I'll just drive past the house and see what's going on." The fog grew thicker as he passed Canyon Road and entered the valley. It was always misty at night down in this part of town, even in the summer. The car headlights seemed to hit the swirling mist and bounce back onto the windshield. He tried the brights, but they were worse. An oncoming car swerved to miss him. Other drivers couldn't see either. Corey realized a thought that didn't make him feel any more confident. "This is a mistake," he told himself. But the fog lightened as he turned down Mill Road. A small Toyota, jammed with at least 6 teenagers, honked as it sped past him. They were probably coming from the deserted mill at the end of the road, a favorite make-out spot for shady-side kids. The dream about Anna, in which she was kissing his face, flashed into his mind. He turned the radio up. Q Rock was up to the L's. They were playing "Love Me Do." Tapping his hands against the wheel to the music, recreating the sexy dream in his mind, he nearly missed the turn onto Fear Street. He realized where he was and hit the brake hard, making a skidding turn across the wet pavement. It seemed to grow darker as soon as he turned onto the narrow, curving street. Tall maples and oaks lined both sides, the bare, creaking branches nearly forming an archway over the road, tangled limbs blocking much of the pale gray light from the street lamps. He couldn't see it in the dark, but he knew that he was passing Simon Fear's burned-out mansion. He sped up and turned up the heater. The houses, rambling old Victorians for the most part, were set far back from the road, behind unkept hedges of overlooking lawns, still thick with swirling brown leaves. "How am I ever going to find which house is hers?" Corey asked himself, wiping the inside of the windshield clear with his sweatshirt sleeve. He squinted out through the smeared glass, trying unsuccessfully to see a street number. What was her number? He asked himself, beginning to panic. Had he driven all this way without even knowing her house number? No, it was 444, he remembered. He pulled the car over to the side of the road and shifted into park. He turned off the headlights and waited for his eyes to adjust to the darkness. He could actually see a little better with the lights off. He turned off the engine, opened the door, and slid out of the car. If he was going to find her house, he'd have to do it on foot. The numbers were on the front doors of the houses. There was no way he could read them from the car. He shivered. The sweatshirt didn't offer much protection from the damp cold. He took a deep breath. The air smelled sour, decaying leaves most likely. An animal howled nearby, a long, mournful wail. It doesn't sound like a dog, he told himself, looking in the direction of the sound but seeing nothing. Could it be a wolf? The animal howled again. It sounded a little closer. Corey suddenly remembered being on Fierce Street before. He was a kid, 9 or 10. His friend Ben had dared him to walk in the woods. Somehow he had gotten the courage to try. But he had walked for only a few minutes when something grabbed his shoulder. Maybe it had been a tree branch. Maybe not. He had run screaming down the street. He had never been so scared in his life. Stop thinking about it, he said aloud. His sneakers crunched over the gravel that lined the side of the road. He came to a metal mailbox tilting at an angle toward the street. Squinting in the darkness, he tried to read the faded name on its side. But it was too dark, and the letters were all peeled away. The animal howled again. This time, it sounded farther away. The wind suddenly stopped. The only sound now was the crunching of his sneakers. He passed a large weather-beaten house, its window shutters peeling and hanging at crazy angles. For some reason, a rusting ship's anchor rested in the very center of the patchy lawn. An old station wagon, its rear bumper missing, 2 of its windows covered with cardboard, stood in the driveway. Nice night for a stroll, Corey told himself. He started humming Love Me Do to himself. Then he started singing it. Why not? There was no one around to hear him. Fierce Street was deserted. Nothing moved except the scrabbling brown leaves driven by the shifting wind. One house was brightly lit. A porch light cast bright golden beams over the lawn, and all of the downstairs and second floor rooms seemed to be lighted. Was that Anna's house? No. The sign on the porch said 442. The wind picked up again, sending a chill down Corey's back. He shoved his hands into his jeans pocket to try to warm them. He had a sudden hunch and turned back to see if the car was okay. He couldn't see it. The street had curved too far. Should he go back? No. He'd come this far. The next house had to be Anna's, if she lived there. He began walking faster. The pavement beneath his sneakers was wet and slippery, and he slipped a couple of times but quickly regained his balance. A ragged, low hedge bordered the yard of the next house. Was this the Corwin house? Corey couldn't find a mailbox. Oh, there it was, down on the street. It had fallen off its pole. He picked up the mailbox. There was a number on its side. 444. This was it. He dropped it back to the street and wiped his wet hands on his jeans. The house was completely dark and silent. No sign of life. No car in the driveway. Corey peered over the low hedge to the front porch. A screen door hung open, banging against the side of the house. When the wind blew, an overturned lawn chair was beside it. Corey stepped to the edge of the drive. What now? Go up to the house and knock on the door? There doesn't seem to be anyone home. He looked at the overgrown shrubs, the thick covering of unraked leaves and tangles of waist-high grass and weeds. It didn't look as if anyone had lived there for years. This gotta be the wrong house, he thought. Then he heard something moving across the gravel. A footstep. He listened. The wind picked up. He couldn't hear anything. It must have been leaves, or an animal, or some sort. He decided to walk back to the car. There was no point standing out in the cold staring at a deserted old house. He heard another footstep. Then another. Someone was behind him. Someone was following him, coming up fast. Corey picked up his pace, started to jog, hoping to leave the sounds behind, hoping it was just leaves, just a dog, just a lonely field cat. But the footsteps came faster. Someone was chasing him. Someone was right behind him. He started to turn around when a hand grabbed his shoulder. Chapter 6. Corey cried out and spun out of the man's grasp. The man looked more startled than Corey. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. Corey stared at him, gasping for breath, his muscles tense for a fight or for a fast escape. He was a tall, powerful-looking man, wearing a faded gray slicker and a battered old tennis hat. He had a dazed stubble of gray beard, and he smelled of stale cigarette smoke. No need to be frightened, he said. He had a high-pitched voice for something so big. Why'd you... Corey was still too out of breath to talk. He backed up another few steps, relaxing a little, but still eyeing the man warily. I saw you stop your car, the man said, pointing back in the direction of Corey's car. I live down the street. I was walking Voltaire. That's my dog. I thought maybe you were lost or in trouble, so I came after you. Where's your dog? Corey asked suspiciously. The man frowned, seemingly annoyed by Corey's mistrust. Voltaire doesn't like strangers, he said slowly. He's very protective of his turf. I put him back in the house before I came to see if you needed help. Corey was beginning to breathe normally again, but he knew he couldn't relax his guard. There was something strange about this neighbor, not just his appearance, but in his menacing stare, the way he kept looking Corey up and down, his face tight, expressionless. Car breakdown? The man asked. No, Corey said. Then what are you doing out here? You lost? Not exactly. I was looking for the Corwins. You found them, the man said, gesturing with his head toward the dark house. You know them? Well, not really. They're strange people. I wouldn't go up there uninvited. I don't think. The man scratched at his stubble. What do you mean? Corey shivered. He never felt so chilled in his life. Just that. Oh. They stood staring at each other for a long moment. They keep to themselves mostly, the man said. He put his hands in his slicker pockets and turned back toward the street. If you're not lost, or anything, guess I'll head back. Yes, no, I'm fine. Thanks, Corey said uncertainly. He looked up to the Corwin house. A light flickered on in an upstairs window. So, someone was home after all. They're pretty strange folks, the man repeated, walking quickly now. He turned around. Of course, everyone's pretty strange on Fierce Street, he chuckled, as if he had just made a really good joke, and slipped off into the darkness. Corey waited to make sure the man was really gone. Then he turned and headed slowly toward the car. He stopped and looked back to the house. The light was still on in the second-floor room. Should he go up and knock on the door? He'd come this far. Why not be brave? Why not just do it? Act now. Think later. Why did he always have to go back and forth, think things out so carefully before he acted? Besides, he'd have something good to tell David about later. He imagined how his friend would make fun of him if he told him he just stood at the end of the drive and stared at the house. He'd probably hear about it for weeks. The jokes would never stop. Okay, Corey, go for it. He began jogging up the Corwins' driveway. He jogged partly to get warm, partly because he knew he'd never go through with it if he didn't do it quickly. A gymnast learns he has to be aggressive, he told himself. He has to grab onto the rings and push himself where his body normally wouldn't go. As a gymnast, Corey was quick and sure, but this wasn't gymnastics. This was life. He jumped onto the front porch, dodged past the overturned chair, slid on some long carpenter nails that were scattered over the porch floor, and nearly crashed right into the front door. He steadied himself, leaning against the shingled front of the house, located the doorbell, and without hesitating, without giving himself a chance to back down, pushed it hard. He didn't hear it ring inside the house. He pushed it again. He straightened his sweatshirt and pushed back his hair with one hand. The bell didn't make a sound. It must be broken. He knocked, lightly at first, then harder. Silence. He cleared his throat, practiced the smile. He knocked again. This time he heard footsteps. Someone hurrying down a stairway. The door opened a crack. No light poured out. The house was dark inside. An eye stared out at Corey. The door opened a little wider. Two eyes stared suspiciously out. The porch light flickered on, casting a pale yellow glow on the porch and front lawn. A young man stood in the doorway. He had a very round face with puffy round cheeks. His blue eyes were small and watery and set close to his bulby, round nose. Despite the fact that he appeared to be quite young, in his early 20s most likely, his blonde hair was thinning, revealing a lot of forehead. It was tossed messily over his head. A rhinestone earring sparkled in one ear. He stared at Corey for a long time without saying anything. Corey stared back uncomfortably. Finally, he said, "Hi, I'm Corey Brooks. Is Anna home?" The young man's watery eyes grew wide. His mouth twitched once in surprise. "Anna? What do you know about Anna?" His voice was raspy, as if he had a bad sore throat. I go to Shadyside, too." "Shadyside? What's Shadyside?" the young man said, and then coughed for a long time. Went entirely onto the front door, a wheezing smoker's cough. "It's the high school," Corey said when the young man finally stopped coughing. "I met Anna in school this week and—" "That's impossible," the man interrupted, hitting the doorframe with his fist. He glared at Corey. His eyes seemed to glow red in the porch light. "No, really, You didn't meet Anna in school. Anna isn't in school." "Yes, she is," Corey insisted. You the one who called?" "Well, yes, Anna is dead," the young man rasped. "Don't come here again. Anna is dead." Chapter 7. He didn't remember driving home. He remembered staring into the young man's watery eyes. He remembered the long, awkward silence, the pain on the young man's face. He remembered the words. They repeated in his head over and over, like a record stuck in the same groove. Anna is dead. Anna is dead. He remembered uttering some kind of apology. Sorry, that was it. That was all he could say. Sorry. How stupid. How meaningless. But what else could he say? Then I remembered the scowl on the young man's puffy face, the shadows closing over him as the front door slammed shut, and Corey remembered running to his car, running to safety with the words following him. Anna is dead. Anna is dead. He couldn't run fast enough to leave the words behind. He remembered the chill, wet air on his face, the crunch of dry brown leaves beneath his sneakers, the sharp twig that cut his ankle as he ran. Stay away from Fear Street, he told himself. What were you doing on Fear Street so late at night? The stories are all true, and now you are one of them. He remembered how his hand trembled as he tried to get the key into the ignition, and he remembered his panic when the car wouldn't start. Then the motor had kicked over, and he had sped away, his hands gripping the wheel as if it were a lifesaver in a storm-tossed ocean. But he didn't remember the drive home. It was a blur of swirling yellow headlights and black roads, and he didn't remember sneaking back into the house, or silently tiptoeing up the stairs to his room, or getting undressed and climbing into bed. He just remembered the young man's narrow, watery eyes, the pain in those eyes, pain mixed with hatred, and the words, Anna is dead. Anna is dead. He didn't fall asleep until after 4 a.m, and then it was a light sleep, a fitful sleep filled with floating faces he didn't recognize and tilting car headlights that sometimes seemed to be heading right at him and sometimes seemed to shine right through him. On Monday morning, he skipped breakfast and hurried to school to look for Anna. He got there early, 20 minutes before the first bell would ring. He waited by her locker. There were a few other kids down the hall. They seemed to be yawning at each other, leaning against their lockers as if they would fall over if they didn't. He tried opening Anna's locker, but the combination lock wouldn't budge. He sat cross-legged on the floor and waited. After a while, the corridor became noisy and crowded as kids arrived. Some of them said hi to Corey as they walked past. "What are you doing down there, Brooks?" Arnie asked as he lumbered through the door. "Just sitting," Corey told him. The answer seemed to be enough for Arnie. He swung his book bag at Corey, trying to knock him over. Corey dodged away. Arnie laughed and stomped down the hall. "Where is Anna?" "Anna is dead. Anna is a ghost. There are no such things as ghosts." Her locker was real. He spun the dial and pulled at the lock again. The bell rang. He climbed to his feet, felt as if he weighed 400 pounds. He hadn't been able to sleep for 2 nights in a row. The hallway was emptying quickly. Kids were hurrying to their homerooms. He had to hurry too. He had already been late twice this term, and he didn't want to get a detention. But where was Anna? She wasn't coming today. Of course she wasn't coming today. Anna was dead. But he had seen her with his own eyes. He had talked to her. He made it to a homeroom just as the bell rang. The rest of the morning was a struggle to keep his eyes open. Luckily, none of his teachers called on him in any of his classes. In fact, no one seemed to notice he was there. "Maybe I'm becoming a ghost too," he told himself. He looked for Anna in the hallway between classes, but he didn't see her. Just before lunch, he ran into Lisa as they were depositing their book bags in their lockers. "Was Anna Corwin in physics this morning?" he asked her eagerly. "Good morning to you too," Lisa said sarcastically. "Oh, sorry. Good morning, Lisa. Was Anna Corwin in physics this morning?" She angrily slammed her locker shut. "No." "Oh?" Corey tossed his book bag into his locker. He didn't see the annoyed look on Lisa's face. Then I guess she was absent. You're a real Sherlock Holmes, Lisa said, shaking her head. She jammed the lock shut and started to walk away. But then she changed her mind and came back to the locker. What's your problem anyway? Problem? How did Lisa know he had a problem? Why are you acting so weird? I'm not acting weird. He started to make some excuse. But then he decided to tell her. He had to tell someone, and she was his oldest friend. After all, as they walked down to the lunchroom, he told her about the rest of his Saturday night. He told her how he drove to Fear Street, how he knocked on the door, how the strange-looking young man told him Anna was dead. Lisa listened to the story in silence, her face drawn in a tight frown of disapproval. But when Corey finished talking, the anger disappeared, replaced by concern. Something's wrong here, she said softly, following him into the lunch line. A lot is wrong here, Corey exclaimed. I just can't stop thinking about. I think you got the wrong house, she interrupted. She smiled, pleased with her idea. What are you talking about? That's it. You got the wrong house. You woke this guy up, so he decided to play a mean joke on you. Lisa watched for Corey's face to brighten. Waited for him to realize that her theory was a good one. But his only reaction was a weary sigh. Get real, he muttered gloomily. I didn't have the wrong house. You don't know for sure, she insisted, although she could see this theory wasn't going to go over. What did you think you were doing anyway? She asked, poking him in the ribs the way she'd been doing it since they were kids. Why are you driving to this girl's house in the middle of the night? Why are you looking for her all day? Why are you so obsessed with Anna Corwin? There are other girls in the world, you know. He didn't say anything. He seemed to be staring right past her. Corey, did you hear a word I said? Yeah, sure, he answered quickly, still not looking at her. You said the guy in the doorway was playing a mean joke on me. Anna is dead. Some joke. Bye, Corey. She gave him an exasperated handshake and started to leave. What about lunch? He called after her. I'm not hungry anymore. Hey, you want to walk home after school? Can't, he called to her. Monday's the day I work in the office. A lot of kids did clerical work after school in the office. The pay wasn't too bad, and the work was easy, mostly dieting and filing. He watched her make her way through the crowded lunchroom to the double doorways that led to the hall. Why had she accused him of acting weird? She'd been acting pretty weird herself, he decided. So temperamental. I was so angry at him. Why? What had he done to her? Suddenly an idea formed in his head. The office. Of course. Why hadn't he thought of it before? The office. After school in the office, he would be able to answer all his questions. He got out of the lunch line and started toward the door. He decided to go outside and get some air. Maybe walk a bit. He wasn't feeling hungry either. Corey's fingers were purple. They always were after he used the Dido machine, and the purple stayed on 4 days. Why do skills still use these ridiculously old-fashioned machines? He wondered. He never saw Dido machines anywhere else but in schools. He finished Didoing the announcement about the faculty blood drive. He had one other Dido to run off before his office chores were finished. Moving more quietly and sneakily than he really needed to, he made his way to the door of the inner office and peered in. The room was empty. He had overheard that Mr. Sewall, the principal, had left early with a toothache, and one of the secretaries was out sick. That left only Miss Markins, who was busily typing away in the outer reception area. The coast was clear, and would probably stay clear. He slipped into the inner office and pulled the door neatly shut. His hand went for the light switch, but then he realized it might be a bad idea. Miss Markins was sure to notice it. He crept over to the principal's desk in the center of the small office. Framed photographs of Mr. Sewall's two sons seemed to stare at him disapprovingly. Corey walked silently around the desk to get to the object of his search. Against the back wall were the gray filing cabinets. They contained the permanent records of every student at Shadyside. These were the sacred permanent records, the secret files that could make you a success in the world or destroy your life forever. At least that's what most Shadyside High School students were led to believe. I'm sorry, but this will have to go on your permanent record. If a teacher or Mr. Sewall ever said that to you, you knew you were doomed forever. Whatever it was, whatever crime you had committed, whatever error you had made would follow you for the rest of your life. There it would be, in your permanent record. Corey ran his hand over the first row of file drawers, quickly scanning the little identification cards on the front. Just being in the same room with the permanent records made him nervous. The fact that he had no business in there and that he'd have to do some fast explaining if he was caught made him so nervous. He could barely read the ID cards. He stopped his search for a second, held his breath, and listened. Miss Markins was still typing away. Whew. He allowed himself to breathe once again. I can't believe I'm doing this. What am I doing in here? He asked himself, stooping low and pulling out a long file drawer on the bottom row. He knew the answer to that question. He was going to take a look at Anna Corwin's permanent record. He was going to find out the truth about her. He was going to find out everything he could about her. His fingers sifted quickly through the files. He knew this wasn't right. He knew it was crazy behavior. He knew he never did things like this. At least, before Anna, he never did things like this. Footsteps. He took a deep breath. He listened for her typing, but it had stopped. He dived under Mr. Sewall's desk just as she entered the room. Safe, he told himself. Or was he? Had she heard him in there? He almost cried out. He had left the file drawer open. If she saw it, she'd know he'd been in there. She stood behind the desk. Her legs were 3 inches from his face. For a second, he imagined reaching out and grabbing her knees, just to see how loud she'd scream. Just for a laugh. A last laugh before they took him away. Suspend him forever. Put it all on his permanent record. He held his breath. It seemed as if he'd been holding it ever since he sneaked into this office. She was leaning over the desk, writing something, leaving a note for Mr. Sewall, most likely. I can't believe I'm sitting here under Mr. Sewall's desk, he told himself silently. But Anna's face flashed into his mind again, and he heard the words of the strange young man at the doorway of her house, and he remembered why he was there. Miss Markins finished her note and walked out of the office without noticing the open file drawer. As soon as he heard her resume her typing, Corey darted out from under the desk and returned to the file drawer, moving his hands quickly through the C's. What would Anna's file tell him? What truth would it reveal about this beautiful girl who had so completely taken over his thoughts. Corner man. His hands moved quickly, pushing the files back. At last, Cornwall, Corwood, Corwith. Wait a minute. He went back through the last 5 or 6. Then he moved forward 9 or 10 more. He hadn't missed any, and none of them were filed out of order. The files went from Cornwall to Corwood. There was no file for anyone named Anna Corwin. Chapter 8. Timber! Look at that guy go down! Arnie's voice boomed over the cheers of the crowd. He's too tall, David cried. He's 7 feet tall and he's just a freshman. He's still growing, Arnie added. They looked over at Corey, who was staring straight across the gymnasium. Hey, Brooks! Earth calling Brooks! David shouted right in his ear. But Corey didn't respond. The Shady Side cheerleaders did a quick routine during the timeout. Then the basketball game resumed. It wasn't much of a game. Westerville, with its 7-foot freshman center, was running the Shady Side Cougars off the floor. They have only one play. Toss it to the big guy, David observed. I'd like to toss it to that cheerleader on the end, Arnie shouted, loud enough for half the auditorium to hear. Oh, man, what a fox! David and Arnie both waited for Corey to add his opinion, but didn't say anything. He looked at them as if seeing them for the first time. Good game, huh? He said, forcing a smile. What game are you watching? Arnie snapped. We're losing by 20 points. And the game isn't as close as the score, David added. He and Arnie burst into righteous laughter, slapping each other high fives. The weak, forced smile faded from Corey's face. He turned and started surveying the auditorium again. You're a lot of laughs these days, Brooks, Arnie said, reaching across David to punch Corey as hard as he could on the shoulder. I'm going down to get a Coke. He pushed his way down the aisle and disappeared around the side of the bleachers. You feeling okay? David asked. He had to ask it twice before Corey heard him. Yeah, fine. Well, how come you missed practice this afternoon? I don't know. Just forgot, I guess. Wellner was furious. That's the second practice you missed this week, Corey. And the Friday practice is the most important, especially since we have a meet tomorrow. I know, Corey said, sounding annoyed. Give me some slack, David. You're not my mother. Hey, David looked really hurt. I'm your teammate, aren't I? I'm your friend, aren't I? So, you tell me. What's your problem, Brooks? Oh, nothing, just... The crowd roared all around them. People jumped to their feet. Something had obviously gone Shady Side's way. But David and Corey had missed it. The cheerleaders came back on the floor. The bleachers were shaking under the deafening noise. Corey looked to the scoreboard. The Cougars were only behind by 15 now. That must explain the excitement. It's that blonde girl, isn't it? David said, when it became quiet enough to talk. I guess, Corey shrugged. He didn't really want to get into any big discussion with David. He felt bad. He really hadn't forgotten about gymnastic practice. How is that possible? Was he really losing his mind over this girl? You going out with her? David asked. I haven't seen her, Corey said, looking across the basketball floor. What? You heard me. I haven't seen her all week. I looked for her every day, but she hasn't been in school. And that's why you're acting like a zombie? Get off my case, McCaff, Corey scowled. You're screwing up your gymnastics rating because of a girl you don't know that you haven't seen. Well, That makes sense to me. Corey didn't say anything. Then he suddenly blurted out, I don't even know if she exists. He regretted saying it immediately. It didn't make any sense, and he knew it. And now he had given David even more of an opportunity to put him down and give him a hard time. But to Corey's surprise, David reacted with real concern. What do you mean, Brooks? You told me you saw her. More than once. You told me you talked to her. You told me she's in Lisa's physics class. You told me all this stuff about her because that's all you talk about these days. So what do you mean she doesn't exist? I work after school in the office on Mondays. You know? So Monday afternoon, I went into the permanent files and looked her up. There was no file for her. David looked shocked, but not for the reason Corey imagined. You can get into the files? He cried. Great. What does mine say about me? I didn't. I'll give you $10 to look at my file. Better than that, I'll pay you back the $10 I owe you. No deal, Corey said disgustedly. You don't understand. I went to her house last week, and this guy said... The crowd groaned. Loud boos echoed off the tile floors. Corey's eye caught the scoreboard. Shadyside was losing by 22. Arnie pushed his way back into the row and plopped down beside David. That guy's too tall, he said. He had spilled Coke down the front of his sweatshirt. They've got to raise the baskets. Or lower the floor, David said, and they both began to howl. Corey stood up. Guess I'm going, he told them. This is a drag. You're a drag, Arnie said, grinning. She's a transfer student, isn't she? David said, pulling Corey back down to the bench. Yeah. Well, maybe her file hasn't been sent over from other school yet. David was smart. Maybe he was right. But Corey didn't really believe it. It was November already. How long did it take to transfer files? Is he talking about that weird blonde girl again? Arnie boomed, leaning over David to shout right in Corey's face. What have you been doing to her? He leered. Must be pretty good or you wouldn't be missing practice so much. Arnie laughed, as if he had just said the funniest thing ever spoken. Corey just shook his head wearily. He realized he must seem pretty weird to his two friends. He seemed pretty weird to himself. He'd never been haunted by someone this way before. He'd never had anything that he couldn't shut out of his mind, that he couldn't force himself to stop thinking about. He had always been in control of his thoughts. And now? Now? Was he out of control? See you guys later, he said, and quickly headed the other way down the row so they couldn't pull him back. The crowd groaned, then groaned again. The small contingent of Westerville fans across the floor was cheering wildly. It looked like a bad night for the Cougars. A bad night for everyone, Corey thought. He had searched the bleachers row by row for Anna, but she wasn't there. He climbed into his car, shivering against the chill. After 3 tries, he got it started. He drove around aimlessly for a while, heading down Park Drive, then across Hawthorne to Mill Road. The streets were empty. Most houses were already dark. He turned on the radio, but no one was playing any music he liked. So he clicked it off. He realized he was very tired. He hadn't slept well all week. He spun the car around and headed for home. He was asleep when the ringing phone woke him. He squinted at his alarm clock. It was 1:30 in the morning. His hand knocked the receiver off the phone. He fumbled around until he grabbed it up. Hello? Stay away from Anna. What? The voice on the other end was a hoarse whisper. so quiet he could barely make out the words. "Stay away from Anna," the strange voice whispered slowly and distinctly, each word filled with menace. "She's dead. She's a dead girl. Stay away from her, or you'll be next." Chapter 9. Corey suddenly felt very cold. He climbed out of bed and walked in darkness over to his bedroom window. He checked to make sure the window was closed. Then he reached down and felt the radiator. Heat was coming up full blast. He stood there for a long while, trying to get rid of the chill, staring out at the silent stillness of his backyard lit only by a pale half moon. The voice on the phone still whispered in his ears. Corey reached up and pulled his black curls hard, trying to make the harsh whispers disappear, trying to make the threatening words stop repeating in his mind. It didn't help. It didn't work. Realizing his chill came from the inside, Corey stepped away from the radiator and, tripping over a pair of sneakers he had left in the center of the room, made his way back to bed. Someone had threatened his life. Someone knew where he lived. Someone knew how to reach him. Someone knew him and knew he was interested in Anna. Someone wanted to make sure he stayed away from Anna. But who? Was it one of his friends playing a joke? No. This was no joke. This was for real. The whispers were filled with true menace, true hatred. The threat was sincere. "Stay away from Anna, or you'll be dead too." Who was it? The strange, puffy-cheeked young man who answered the Corwins' door? Maybe. It was hard to tell from whispers. Hard to tell if it was a man or a woman. Corey closed his eyes tight and tried to drive the whispers from his mind. He felt a little warmer now, but he was still far from sleep. He turned onto his side, then slid over onto his other side, then tried sleeping on his stomach. For some reason, he found himself thinking about the strange neighbor who had stopped him that night on Fear Street. He had been thinking about that man all week, picturing his worn gray slicker, his stubbled face, the menacing way he had stared at Corey. He said he was a neighbor, but why was he directly outside the Corwins' house so late at night? He had claimed to be walking his dog, but Corey had seen no dog. And why had the man warned Corey to stay away from the Corwins? Was he warning Corey or threatening him? Corey forced the man's face out of his mind. He decided to think about Anna instead. Those clear blue eyes, as bright as a doll's, the dramatically red lips on that pale ivory skin. He remembered the dream where she was kissing him again and again. The phone rang. He was still wide awake, but it startled him, making him jump straight out of bed. He picked up the receiver at the beginning of the second ring. Hello? The word came out, choked and dry. "Corey, is that you?" A tiny voice, very faint. "Yes?" His heart was pounding so hard, he could barely get the word out. "Can you help me, Corey?" He had spoken to her only once, but he recognized her soft, almost childlike voice. "It's me, Anna Corwin." "I know," he said. Then he felt terribly foolish. How would he know that she would be the one calling him in the middle of the night? Unless he had been thinking of nothing but her for weeks. "I need you to help me," she said, speaking rapidly, her voice just above a whisper. "I don't know anyone else. You're the only one I've talked to. Can you help me?" She sounded so frightened, so desperately frightened. Well, why was he hesitating?